If you think you know what hell looks like, think again. Smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, and drop a comment if you dare to walk through the gates of Australia's most notorious prison with me. Because once you step inside Barwon, you don't just leave your freedom at the door. You leave your humanity. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a freezing June morning in Geelong, Victoria. Detective Sarah Chen had been with the Major Crime Unit for 12 years, and she'd seen things that would make most people quit the job. But when her phone rang that night, even she wasn't prepared for what waited inside the reinforced concrete walls of Barwon Maximum Security Prison. "We've got a situation," the voice on the other end said. It was Warden Michael Garrett, and his tone carried something Chen had never heard from him before. "Fear. You need to get here now. And Sarah, bring your whole team. This isn't just a murder. This is a message." 20 minutes later, Chen's unmarked sedan pulled up to the prison's main gate. Barwon loomed in the darkness like a sleeping beast, all razor wire and floodlights cutting through the winter fog. Built in 1997 in Lara, just outside Geelong, Barwon was designed to house Victoria's most dangerous criminals. The men inside these walls weren't your average offenders. These were cop killers, gang leaders, serial offenders who'd proven too violent for standard prisons. The kind of men who'd made violence an art form. Chen badged her way through 3 security checkpoints, each one more intense than the last. The guards' faces were pale, drawn. Whatever had happened tonight had shaken people who dealt with Australia's worst criminals every single day. That fact alone made Chen's pulse quicken. Warden Garrett met her in the administration block. He was a tall man, former military, the kind who'd built a reputation on being unshakable. But his hands trembled slightly as he handed Chen a pair of latex gloves. "Unit 7, Cell 42, he said. "Inmate named Marcus Draven. Found him an hour ago during standard rounds." "Chen, I've been running prisons for 23 years. I've never seen anything like this." They walked through corridors painted in institutional beige, their footsteps echoing off concrete floors polished by decades of shuffling feet. The prison was on lockdown. Every cell, door sealed. But Chen could feel hundreds of eyes watching through the narrow observation slots. The inmates knew something had happened. In a place like Barwon, information was currency, and right now, everyone was desperate to know what had bought such a heavy police presence at nearly 3 in the morning. Unit 7 was the highest security wing. Reinforced cells, 23-hour lockdown, minimal human contact. The men housed here were considered too dangerous to mix with the general population. Marcus Draven had been one of them. Chen stopped outside cell 42. The door stood open, and the metallic smell of blood hit her before she even stepped inside. She'd been warned, but nothing could have prepared her for the scene that greeted her. Marcus Draven sat propped against the far wall of his cell. Or rather, what was left of Marcus Draven. His throat had been cut so deeply that his head tilted at an unnatural angle. But that wasn't what made Chen's stomach turn. It was the position of the body, the way his hands had been arranged, and most disturbing of all, the message carved into his chest with something sharp. 3 words, Garrett said from behind her, his voice barely a whisper. He carved 3 words into his own chest before he died. Chen leaned closer, her flashlight illuminating the crude letters etched into dead flesh. The words were clear, deliberate, made with someone's last moments of consciousness. "They're still here." "Who's still here?" Chen asked, though she already felt the answer forming in the cold pit of her stomach. Garrett shook his head. "That's the thing, Detective. Draven was in solitary. No cellmate. No visitors for 3 weeks. No commissary privileges. The door was locked from the outside when we found him. The security footage shows nobody entering or leaving this cell for the past 14 hours. Chen's mind raced. A locked room. No forced entry. No weapon found at the scene. And a dying message that suggested Draven wasn't alone, even though every piece of evidence said he absolutely was. "Pull his file," Chen ordered. "I want to know everything. Who he associated with, who he pissed off, every single detail of his life before Barwon, and every second since he walked through those gates." As Garrett hurried off, Chen stood alone in the cell with Marcus Draven's corpse. She'd worked hundreds of cases, solved dozens of murders that seemed impossible. But this felt different. The scratches on the wall near the body. The way Draven's fingers were positioned, as if he'd been trying to point at something. And those 3 words, carved with his last breath. They're still here. Chun turned slowly, surveying the small cell. 8 feet by 10 feet. Concrete walls. Steel bunk. Stainless steel toilet. Nothing that could be used as a weapon. Nothing that explained how a man in complete isolation had ended up with his throat cut and a message carved into his flesh. She was about to call for the forensics team when she noticed it. A small mark on the wall above the bunk, barely visible. She climbed up carefully, shining her light directly on it. More scratches. Not random. Deliberate. Numbers. 7 to 42, 6 to 38, 5 to 29, 4 to 15. Cell numbers. 4 of them. Including this one. Chen's blood turned to ice. She jumped down from the bunk and ran to the cell door, nearly colliding with Warden Garrett as he returned. "Those cell numbers," she said urgently. "Check them.
Now."
All of them. Garrett's face went white as he processed what she was suggesting. He grabbed his radio, barking orders to the guards on duty. Within minutes, the reports started coming back. Cells 6 to 38. Inmate found dead. Throat cut. Message carved in chest. Cell 5 to 29. Inmate found dead. Throat cut. Message carved in chest. Cell 4 to 15. Inmate found dead. Throat cut. Message carved in chest. For men. For isolated cells. All locked from the outside. All dead within the same 6-hour window. And all of them with the same message carved into their flesh. They're still here. Chin stood in the corridor, her mind working frantically to piece together what should have been impossible. But before she could speak, before she could issue another order, the lights went out. Every single light in Unit 7 plunged into darkness. And in that darkness, from somewhere deep within the prison, someone started screaming. But when they opened the emergency lighting and rushed toward the sound, what they found in Cell 3-07 changed everything. The emergency lights flickered on, casting Unit 3 in a sickly red glow that made everything look like a crime scene photograph. Chen ran toward Cell 3-07, her weapon drawn, Garrett and 4 guards flanking her. The screaming had stopped, replaced by something worse. Silence. Cell 3-07 belonged to Vincent Mallory, a former police officer turned drug lord who'd been serving 25 years for the execution-style murders of 3 rival dealers. Mallory had connections everywhere, both inside Barwon and out. He was untouchable, protected by a network of corrupt guards and inmates who owed him favors. If someone had gotten to Mallory, then the rules had changed completely. The cell door hung open. Not forced. Not broken. Simply open, as if someone had walked right through with a key. Chun entered first, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. Mallory sat on his bunk, alive but trembling. His face was sheet white, eyes wide with terror. This was a man who'd killed without hesitation, who'd built an empire on fear. But right now, he looked like a child who'd just woken from a nightmare. "Mallory," Chun said sharply. "What happened? Who was in here?" Mallory's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. His hands shook so badly he had to grip the edge of the bunk to steady them. Chin noticed something else. Fresh scratches on his arms. Deep ones, like he'd been clawing at himself. "Get the medics," she ordered. But as a guard turned to leave, Mallory finally spoke. "They came through the walls," he whispered. His voice cracked with disbelief. "I heard them."
Scratching.
Whispering. Then the door just opened, and they were there, standing in the shadows. 3 of them. Chun exchanged a glance with Garrett. Hallucinations? A psychotic break? Or something else? "Who were they?" she pressed. Mallory laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You don't understand. They weren't real. They couldn't be real. Because all 3 of them are dead. I watched them die." Chen's skin prickled. "Explain." Mallory's eyes focused on her for the first time, and she saw something beyond fear in them.
Guilt.
8 years ago, before I got transferred here, I was at Port Phillip Prison. There was an incident. 3 inmates tried to expose a smuggling operation I was running with some guards. They had evidence, recordings. They were going to bring everything down. What did you do? Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. We staged a riot, Mallory said flatly. Made it look like gang violence. All 3 of them died that night. Stabbed in their cells. Case closed. No investigation. No questions. He looked down at his shaking hands. Marcus Draven was one of them. Cells 7 to 42. Tommy Chun, cells 6 to 38. Rashid Kumar, cell 5 to 29. And David Foster, cell 4 to 15. The cell numbers from Draven's wall. Chun felt her heart hammering. You're saying the 4 victims tonight are the same men you had killed 8 years ago? No, Mallory said, his voice rising. I'm saying the 4 victims tonight are the men I had killed along with those 3. Don't you see? Draven, Chun, Kumar, and Foster. They're dead again. But the 3 who just came to my cell, the 3 I saw standing in my doorway, they were the ones I murdered back then. And they left me alive to deliver a message. What message? Garrett demanded. Mallory looked at Chun with hollow eyes. There are 7 more. 7 more men involved in those murders 8 years ago. Guards, inmates, people on the outside who helped cover it up. And whatever's happening tonight, it's not finished. They're working down a list. Chen's mind raced. Give me the names. Every single person involved. As Mallory began reciting names, Chen's phone buzzed. A text from her forensics team analyzing the crime scenes. She read it twice, not believing what she was seeing. The DNA under Draven's fingernails, she said slowly. It's not his own. It belongs to someone else. She looked up at Garrett. It belongs to Michael Reeves, a former Barwon guard. He died 6 months ago. Heart attack. We attended his funeral. The color drained from Garrett's face. That's impossible. So, is everything else about tonight? Chen snapped. She turned back to Mallory. These 7 names. Where are they now? Mallory's laugh was bitter. 3 of them are inmates here at Barwon. 2 are former guards who still live in Geelong. One's a lawyer in Melbourne. And the last one, he paused, swallowing hard. The last one is you, Warden Garrett. The room went deathly silent. Chen's hand instinctively moved toward her weapon as she looked at Garrett. The warden's face had gone completely white. I don't know what he's talking about, Garrett said, but his voice lacked conviction. You were a guard at Port Phillip 8 years ago, Mallory said. You were on duty the night of the riot. You unlocked the doors. You let us in. And when it was over, you helped bury the evidence. Before Chen could respond, before she could process this revelation, the emergency lights went out again. This time they didn't come back on. In the absolute darkness, Chen heard footsteps. Multiple sets. Coming closer. And beneath them, a sound that made her blood freeze. Scratching. Like fingernails dragging across concrete walls. The scratching grew louder, surrounding them from all directions. Chun fumbled for her flashlight, but before she could switch it on, someone grabbed her arm. The hand was ice cold, the grip impossibly strong. And then a voice whispered in her ear, so close she could feel breath against her skin. You're going to help us finish this, Detective Chen. Whether you want to or not. The lights snapped back on. Chen spun around, weapon raised. But she was alone in the cell. Mallory was gone. The guards were gone. Even Warden Garrett had vanished. She was standing in cell 3-07, completely alone, with the door sealed shut from the outside. And on the wall, written in something dark and wet, were 3 new words. 7 more tonight. Chen's radio crackled to life. A panicked guard's voice cut through the static. Detective, we've got a situation in the West Wing. 3 inmates found dead in their cells. Same pattern. Throats cut. Doors locked. And detective, their names were on Mallory's list. Chen's hands trembled as she reached for the cell door. It wouldn't open. She was locked in, trapped in the same type of cell where 5 men had already died tonight. And somewhere in the darkness beyond her cell, she heard footsteps approaching. Chun threw her shoulder against the cell door. Once, twice, 3 times. The steel didn't budge. Her radio crackled again, but this time only static came through. She was cut off, alone, and whatever had killed 5 men tonight was coming for her. Think, she commanded herself. Think like a detective, not a victim. She examined the cell systematically. No windows. No vents large enough for a person. One door, sealed from outside. The walls were solid concrete, the same walls that had held Australia's most dangerous criminals. But someone or something had moved through this prison like it didn't exist. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Chun raised her weapon, aiming at the observation slot. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her ears. The slot opened slowly, and a pair of eyes stared through. Not dead eyes. Very much alive. "Warden Garrett," Chun said, not lowering her gun. "Open this door."
Now.
"I can't do that, Detective." His voice was steady now, resigned. "Not until I explain what really happened 8 years ago." "You helped murder 3 inmates," Chun said coldly. "What else is there to explain?" "Everything," Garrett replied. "Those 3 men, they weren't just whistleblowers. They discovered something bigger than a smuggling operation. They found evidence of a systematic execution program. For 2 decades, certain inmates at Port Phillip were being eliminated. Not because they were dangerous, but because they knew too much about corruption that went all the way to the top. Judges, prosecutors, police commissioners. The 3 who died weren't innocent, Chen. They were participants who got cold feet." Chen's mind raced. "So, you killed them to protect the program?" "No," Garrett said. "I killed them because I was ordered to. And when I refused to continue, they transferred me here to Barwon and made sure I understood what happens to people who don't follow orders. My daughter, Chun. They told me what they'd do to my daughter if I ever talked." "Then why is this happening now?" Chun demanded. "Why are people dying tonight?" "Because someone found the evidence," Garrett said. "The recordings those 3 inmates made before they died. Someone's been using them to systematically expose and eliminate everyone involved. The 4 inmates who died tonight, they were the ones who actually committed the murders. Mallory arranged it, but those 4 did the killing. And the 3 remaining names on the list? Former guards like me. Cowards who followed orders." Garrett's voice broke. "Chun, I deserve what's coming. But you don't. You weren't involved. So I'm going to open this door, and you're going to walk out of here and forget everything you saw tonight." "I'm a detective," Chun said. "I don't forget. And I don't run." The observation slot closed. Chun heard the lock mechanism grinding, and then the door swung open. Garrett stood in the corridor, his service weapon in hand. But he wasn't pointing it at Chun. He was pointing it down the hallway, where 3 figures emerged from the shadows. They weren't ghosts. They were men very much alive, wearing prison guard uniforms. But their faces, Chun recognized them from the files she'd pulled. The 3 inmates Garrett had helped murder 8 years ago. "Impossible," Chun whispered. The man in front smiled. "Not impossible, Detective. Just well planned.
We didn't die that night.
We escaped. Mallory thought he'd killed us, but he'd killed 3 other inmates we'd paid to take our places. Dental records switched. DNA samples swapped. We've been on the outside for 8 years, building our case, waiting for the right moment. Then why come back now?" Chun asked. "Why not just turn over the evidence?" "Because the system is broken," the second man said. "We had evidence 8 years ago. It disappeared. We had witnesses. They recanted or died. So we decided to become judge, jury, and executioner ourselves." Chen's weapon was still raised. "I can't let you kill anyone else." "You don't have a choice," the third man said, raising his own gun. But before anyone could fire, Garrett stepped between them and Chen. "She wasn't part of this. Neither was I, not really. We were pawns. If you want justice, take me, but let her walk away." The 3 men looked at each other, then at Garrett. "Justice isn't about revenge," the first man said finally. "It's about truth. Detective Chun, there's a safe in the warden's office. Combination is written under Marcus Draven's bunk. Inside you'll find everything. Every recording, every document, every name. Enough to burn the whole system down. And you three?
Chen asked.
We were never here. They backed into the shadows, and within seconds, they'd vanished as completely as they'd appeared. Chen turned to Garrett. You're under arrest. He nodded slowly, removing his weapon and handing it to her. I know. But Chen, when you open that safe, when you see what's inside, remember something. The real monsters aren't always the ones behind bars. 3 hours later, Chen stood in her office surrounded by federal investigators. The safe had contained exactly what they'd promised. 20 years of corruption laid bare. Hundreds of names. Dozens of murders disguised as prison violence. The story would break within days. Australia's justice system would be torn apart and rebuilt. Lives would be destroyed. But the truth would finally see light. Chen looked at the evidence spread across her desk and thought about the 3 men who'd orchestrated tonight's events. They'd killed 4 people, but they'd also exposed a conspiracy that had claimed hundreds of lives over 2 decades. Justice, she realized, wasn't always black and white. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for doing what we couldn't, Detective. The truth matters more than revenge. But remember, the list was longer than 7. Some monsters are still out there. Some are closer than you think. Watch your back. Chen deleted the message and stared out her office window at the sunrise breaking over Melbourne. Somewhere out there, 3 ghosts had returned to whatever new lives they'd built. And somewhere, other conspirators were waking up to discover their world was about to end. She'd solved the case. But the question that would haunt her forever was simple. Had justice been served tonight? Or had she just helped 3 killers escape? Chen never found out. But 3 months later, when a high-ranking judge was found dead in his chambers with evidence of corruption spread across his desk, she received another text. Some ghosts don't rest, Detective. They hunt. And Chen realized that the night at Barwon wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning.